I have a question for Kathy. I saw your quilt pieces in the gallery. They're beautiful. I love them. I'm curious about your process. Like, how are those made? Like, how are those? How do you create those? Like, what's the what are the underlying systems that are happening there? Maybe technically, but also conceptually. Like, what if you want to share more?
Thanks, David. Well, I wish I knew as much as I was thinking about too. I wish I knew as much about robotics as you know, because that's sort of it. That's interesting to me. That sense of, or like what Jonathan, like that sense of what animation really at its core means to breathe life into. Right? We have these relationships with machines, so we do this. We sort of are magical thinkers, right? Still, we're like as humans, and so when we create something that comes to life, like Pinocchio story, right? It comes to life. You know, you have this sense of the real boy at last. Like it comes to life. It's this being that you are all of a sudden in interaction with in some ways. You know, so. But I had this opportunity to work with my sister's a quilter, an amazing long arm quilter, and she has a studio in Duluth, and so she has a robotic machine there. So she mostly does hand motion. It's amazing work. But so she had a robotic machine that's driven by code. And so I wanted to just think about what it would be like to actually map onto that, you know. And so instead of mapping always onto a screen, or I work with, I like sound is a real core sense for me. So so that's like this thing in the ether, right? So it's not very tangible. It's this thing that surrounds your body. It, you know, resonates in your body, but it's not something that you touch. And so so I wanted to just see what it would be like if, you know, if I sort of drew into that canvas of fabric. And so and I also like, I think I relate to like what you're saying, Jim. It's like whenever you're doing, I keep pulling the new things into my work, and you have this experience of being on a tightrope, right? It's like, how is this a good idea? Sort of that trembling before God kind of sense of like, you know, of awkwardness, vulnerability. You don't understand the material, and in that moment, the material teaches you so much, right? It humbles you. It teaches you so much. So I was working with, you know, thread breaking, you know, and this fabric, which was an amazing experience, really. But I think that's what's interesting too is it's interesting, Jonathan, how you have this animation, you have this and you have painting, and they feel so connected, but they're absolutely showing, they're manifesting time, but in a really different way, right? So it's like, so when I'm doing animations on that act out within the stage of a screen, it's sort of fleeting, right? It's time, but it's fleeting time. And then but with those quilted works, it was like I was going back and forth across this long, so the machine is very big. It was like this manuscript, this long scrolling manuscript that you're working with its own limitations about how much of the manuscript you can see, you know, how you can write to that space. But it's this accrual of time, right? So it's like this artifact, this accrual, this manifestation of time that you can actually touch and see as almost like a geologic kind of experience. It's kind of like, David, I love how you have this like time-based spatial, you're moving through space, right? This stream of data, and then you manifest it within an object, which, you know, and it's this making of artifact, or this relationship with geologies, or like, you know, it's like this relationship with time, with things that we make, that then it's like our bodies become bone, become, you know, become carcass, you know. It's like it's our own relationship to time, which is manifested physically, and you know, becomes this fossil, this, you know, this thing. So to me, it was really interesting to work in a physical, with that very physical material, and see how those landscapes evolved. And I, so like you could it's easy to say you would just code it and it would go, but it's really a very physical process, right? Like robotics, right? It's like you saying, oh, you just code that, hang it up, and boom. But it's like, it's actually this relationship, or like with paintings, a relationship with this physical thing that behaves, and it has its own behavior, it has its own physicality, it has its own physics to it. And so it was a very physical, hard, you know, you're rolling something. And I started then to actually put my human self into that as well, because I wanted to also do this human mark making within that context of the machine. So it was almost like, felt like a partner or a duet kind of, you know, thing that started to evolve. And then I like working in series. So there's a whole series. There's about 40 quilts that I ended up doing as part of that series. So it's sort of like that. Again, it's like I like this sense of flow, or always speaking, like this more and more over and over again, kind of language or speaking.
I guess I was thinking like some of my favorite parts too of those quilts, knowing that they were made by a machine. And I like that you mentioned this, like some of my favorite parts were where the thread was kind of bundled up and twisted and hanging off of there, and like really kind of, and I don't know if it was like it felt in very contrast to like a way a machine would behave, which is a realm where I like to play. I like it when machines kind of screw up
Right, exactly, right, exactly. Therein lies the partnership. It's interesting too, like Matthew's work, like where it's like this, there's the physicality of the painting, but then there's this something that's so ephemeral of the light. So you have this like sense of the time of this more static piece, and then this like this thing that's on top of it, almost like water on top of something you know, something like a rock base, you know, something that has this other scale to it. It's yeah, I like how we're all working in kind of different scales, you know, we're sort of touching time and space and material and in different ways.